Yeah, so I kind of came in with the assumption of we can, hire someone and very quickly get them trained and up to speed. And that was a bad assumption because we can't train people to a specific piece of equipment. What we have to train them on is just general troubleshooting. It's a very long process, but it's what has ultimately helped us grow, the recruit, train, and then retain, because we're putting effort into the training and how we develop a technician. We're having good success at retaining techs now. And so each year kind of compounds and our growth is that much more.
And we're off. Welcome to the Commonwealth Connections podcast. I'm your host, Weston Wilson, and co-host as always, Dawson Fields. Today in the studio, we have Brian VanNote, who owns DRD Repair. It's an equipment service company here in Lexington, Kentucky. Welcome on the show.
God, thank you for having me.
So you want to just give a brief overview of what you guys do and then dive into where you grew up, what brought you here, all that good stuff?
Sure. So DRD Repair, as you stated, is a commercial refrigeration restaurant equipment repair company based here in Lexington. We have a team of skilled technicians that go out and service pretty much any piece of equipment that's involved in the food preparation, food storage. So from walk-in coolers to freezers, commercial ice machines, fryers, grills, just about anything you'd find in a commercial kitchen.
Awesome.
So I came to the business in a very roundabout way. Originally grew up in just outside of Rochester, New York.
Okay.
Spent my entire youth there. Began working in the early 1990s for Valvoline Instant Oil Change there in Rochester, and worked for them for several years, and then decided to make a change and went and spent some time in the Army. Left Rochester when I joined the Army and never went back. So
where were you based when you were in the Army?
All over. I started out here in Kentucky, and then spent some time in Korea, time in Georgia, time back in New York at Fort Drum. So I had multiple duty stations while I was on active duty. Parted active duty in 2001 and went right back to work for Valvoline in Northern Kentucky, and spent the next almost 15 years with Valvoline, working again kind of all over. I was in Northern Kentucky, Nashville, Tennessee, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Hartford, Connecticut, here in Lexington where Valvoline's based.
Been a lot of places.
Yeah. So I traveled all over, had multiple different roles over the years with Valvoline. And in 2015, I kind of had an itch to go out and do something on my own and start looking for business opportunities. And then the process came across a restaurant repair company for sale here in Lexington. And, talked with a broker. And I think 4 months later, I owned the company.
How did you find that it was for sale?
Through a brokerage site.
Okay. So you just put it up there and
yeah. So he was working with a business broker, had it listed on a brokerage site. I came across it, reached out to the broker, got the offering memorandum, spent some time looking at financials, put together a business plan. And like I said, about 4 months later,
seems quick.
It was.
Yeah, that's pretty quick. What really motivated you to leave the corporate world and jump into entrepreneurship? I mean, you spent a lot of time in the corporate world and moved up the ladder.
Yeah. So part of, the roles I had when I was with Valvoline, I spent time as a franchise business consultant. So I was working with entrepreneurs, that were building out quick lube chains, and it just kind of intrigued me, that part of it. And, just over time, I really wanted to have something for myself.
Yeah. Makes sense. So let's just walk through kind of the early timeline of you taking over DRD. What did your first day look like? What did your first week look like?
Yeah.
What were you feeling? What were you thinking?
Yeah. So I'll add a little more commentary to, I started, I took over the company on September 1st of 2015. The kind of the piece that I left out there was on July 3rd of 2015, my son was born. And so, so I left my job at Valvoline 2 weeks after my son was born.
Oh, wow.
And about 45 days before we closed on the business. So, took a giant leap of faith. So, first day, we after closing, went in the morning and with the owner or previous owner and kind of get introduced to the folks. So all this took place. So the entire acquisition process, behind closed doors. So none of the employees knew what was happening. And so day one was really just an introduction and, trying to, establish that, I'm taking over the business. I need you guys and, hopefully we can build something great here.
Did they see it coming? Were they in shock or?
I'd say there was a level of shock, more so with the, a couple of the technicians, that just maybe didn't see it coming. Maybe some of the folks that had been around a little longer had some feeling that, I don't think Danny was too secretive that, he was looking to retire at some point in time. So,
yeah. What size was the business at kind of before you took over? What was the current state of it?
Yeah. So when I bought the company, there was 3 technicians plus the owner. They had a couple folks in the office working. So, at that time it was, as I took over, Danny stayed on with me for close to a year in diminishing capacity. So the amount of time he was involved dwindled over the year. That was by design because I didn't know the business at all. We kind of sat there at the 3 technician mark for that first year. Had a couple hires, couple people parted ways, but really a net even at the end of the first year.
So he stayed on. The previous owner stayed on for a couple of years.
Yeah, it was probably just a little less than a year. So for the first probably 3 months, he was on. He was still out running service calls in the van. I had hired in a fresh BCTC graduate, and he was riding with him in the van for probably the first 3 months. I owned the company, still kind of working full time as a technician, and then each quarter beyond that, we started reducing his hours, and so he was there as a training resource and just a knowledge resource for us over the first just shy of 12 months.
That was smart to write that into the contract. Yeah, it's really smart. So year one, kind of net even on.
Yeah. So when you look at our year one on a gross revenue standpoint was maybe 3 or 5% over what his prior year had been. So I really call it, almost a flat first year.
Yeah.
Second year was probably still flat. Third year, we actually showed a bit of a decline, and it was just those first couple of years, it was almost a revolving door on technicians. I had a couple core people that are still with me to this day when I bought the business, but the rest of it kind of revolved. And that was the hardest lessons we learned the first couple of years were the difficulty of, our recruiting, training, and retaining, people to work on the equipment.
What was like kind of your biggest lessons that you learned year one?
I think the biggest thing I learned is around that the recruit, train, and retain piece. So I came in with an assumption when of, hey, we can hire people and we'll have a good benefits package, a good pay package, and we can hire people and train them up and get them out producing for the company. And what we found is the training process is a lot slower. On the first off, from the total breadth of what a technician's expected to do while they're out in the field. On top of, it's not it's not a sexy profession that people even knows out there. So, the recruiting piece was difficult and still is to this day. That people don't know that being a restaurant equipment technician is even an option. And then you're really pulling from a similar talent pool that you would pull from for HVAC and I always say pick your dirty. A lot of people don't want to come in and work in restaurant environments because they think it's dirty, it's greasy, and it is. The alternative is you can be a residential HVAC technician and be crawling in crawl spaces with all the muck and goop under a house. So,
yeah,
pick your dirty.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure you guys kind of pull some from maybe electricians.
Yeah. So that's probably a piece that, besides people not even understanding that the career fields here, our guys, they're really electrical is the vast majority of what they're chasing when they're chasing issues with equipment. There's a good amount of time it traces right back to an electrical issue. So we don't really pull from people that are maybe classic electricians, though they'd be a really good fit in a lot of cases.
Yeah. They would just have to learn the HVAC side.
Right.
I guess an HVAC tech can do non-commercial electrical work on equipment, but a electrician can't do HVAC work.
Yeah. So it's
right.
Yeah, it is. So, for an HVAC technician or just a restaurant equipment technician, because there's even a dividing line between HVAC and refrigeration. When it comes to licensing, and they're able to work within the electric within the piece of equipment, and it's actually a very big piece of what they do is electrical troubleshooting. So they have that knowledge and ability to do it. But, my guys aren't going to go out and expertly bend conduit and pull electrical service from the panel.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the difference.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because it's such a big part of their job, but they probably aren't allowed to replace a breaker.
Right. Yeah. So, we're pretty much,
which is something that they probably are definitely qualified knowledge-wise to do. Yeah. They just don't have the piece of paper that.
Correct.
Yeah.
So kind of where our electrical piece of the trades comes is we work from the means of disconnect to the equipment. Right. Anything from the disconnect back, it really should be handed back off to the electricians. Though my guys have the knowledge of how to do it, but it's not within their licensing.
Yeah. Thank you, licensing.
Yes. But you really should know what you're doing.
Yeah.
When you get into there. So,
well, to that point, when you came into it, you didn't have a background in it. How much were you having to learn yourself?
Oh, I had to learn everything. And so one of the things I've always been a very hands-on and had a decent technical aptitude. So I was able to through some hands-on work. So I went out in the field the first couple of years. I helped install walk-ins. I helped install ice machines. I started. A big piece of what I do and is work to get our guys good training. And part of that is doing factory training. So on the front end, whenever we're getting introduced to sending someone off somewhere to go get factory training, I'll usually go to the first session of it to just make sure it's a good investment and then expand my knowledge base. So
define what factory training is? Yeah.
So give you an example. The first year I owned the company, I took myself and another technician, and you'll be very familiar here. We went up to Manitowoc, Wisconsin, and spent 6 days at the Manitowoc ice machine. So doing their factory training, and you learn those ice machines frontwards and backwards over a 6-day period in the factory classroom.
So factory training is just working with the factory that produces the product. So probably Hoshizaki has factory training for their ice machines. And
Yeah. So when you come to commercial ice machines, they actually, the major brands, Hoshizaki, Manitowoc, Scotsman, they all have some of the best documentation and tech support there is related to their equipment. And they also all offer multiple levels of training. So they all do field trainings, usually a half day or 1 day session that's in a local market. Like we just took some guys a couple of weeks ago over to Louisville for a half day Hoshizaki factory training. And those generally happen every year. And then each of those manufacturers have an advanced class where you can go directly to the factory and get a multiple day training session. So, I've personally gone to the Hoshizaki training down in Peachtree City, Georgia. I've been to Manitowoc training actually twice now. And each time I was so I could send some other techs, and I just drove up and took some guys with me, went to the training.
Yeah. Well, they probably have to provide all that because they break so often.
Well, and it's really kind of twofold. One, they're tricky. We talked about that a little earlier. Ice machines can be finicky. Once you get to understand them, understand their sequence operation, but they also come with pretty decent warranties on the front end. And so that's the reason they have good training support, and they have the factory trainings is that, they take companies like ours, and, where we're a factory authorized service agent for Hoshizaki and Manitowoc. And, they have machines in warranty for, kind of a 3-year bumper to bumper warranty, 5-year compressor warranty, sometimes 5 or 10-year evaporator warranties. And they have to have the people that they can trust out in the field. And, each time one of those machines breaks down, it's kind of damage to their name. So,
yeah. Well, you guys really helped us out a lot with the, our kind of from the box faulty Manitowoc in one of our locations. I mean,
I think I recall that a couple of years ago.
Well, you can't forget it. It was like a 6-month ordeal. Yeah, and we kept fixing one problem, and then it chain react to another problem and chain react to another problem. There was like 7 different problems with this ice machine out of the box. So,
and unfortunately, it's like anything mechanical. There's times, and I'm sure it had you second guessing the brand. And if I remember correctly, it was something where you kind of missed a portion of the warranty period because your lobby wasn't open during COVID.
Yeah,
you didn't necessarily understand you were having the issues you had.
Yeah, we didn't. Our lobby was closed, and so we didn't even know that the ice machine was a problem, because the second we installed the ice machine, the door, literally a week later, our doors were closed because of COVID. And so we didn't know for over a year that there was even a problem with it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It makes it very difficult.
Yeah.
So to your point of just how extensive the training is, you were starting to say you came in having assumptions on how this was going to go.
Yes.
What exactly was different?
Yeah. So I kind of came in with the assumption of, we can, hire someone and very quickly get them trained and up to speed. And that was a bad assumption, because I really came in not understanding the depth of knowledge that you needed, because we're not working on just one piece of equipment. I can have, over the course of a day, a technician can look at an exhaust fan, a heat pump system, a fryer, an ice machine, a conveyor toaster, a dishwasher, the garbage disposal. The list just goes on and on and on. And because they're working on such a variety of equipment, it makes it difficult to become an expert at any one piece of equipment. So really what I've learned over time is we can't train people to a specific piece of equipment. What we have to train them on is just general troubleshooting. And really, to go back to the electrical piece, electrical troubleshooting is a big piece of it, and just understanding how to source information, because you're not working, you're not a Ford mechanic working on a Ford every single day, right? You not only do you see different ice machines, there's 6 major brands of ice machines. So you have to be, and then within that you have the difference. I think, Weston has experience at Sonic, right? You have nugget machines, you have cubers, you have flaker type machines. And so there's difference in how they all operate. And so the kind of the bad assumption on the front end was it'd be easy to train people. And what we've learned over time is we have to focus our training on just general troubleshooting and the ability to dissect kind of sometimes limited information from service manuals and to understand what the sequence operations of the piece of equipment is, or, kind of what's it supposed to do, so you can figure out why it's not doing that.
Yeah. And for people that don't know, like if you've ever opened up a commercial grill, like those are very complicated pieces of equipment. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and it is a like bird's nest of wires.
Yes. Yeah.
And like one little wire not in the right place or came loose or something could mess the whole thing up. And so it's I have unfortunately decided to take on a grill repair myself, and that was a monster.
There's other challenges, right? So when we go into a restaurant and their grill's down and they have one 48-inch or 60-inch grill and half of it's not working, technicians trying to work around burgers being cooked on the other half of the grill
and getting splashed with grease.
Right. So, but that was, those first couple of years was about kind of learning how to develop a technician, and just coming in with an assumption that we could train them quickly, and just understanding that it's a very long process, but it's what has ultimately helped us grow and like I said, the recruit, train, and then retain, because we're putting effort into the training and how we develop a technician. We're having good success at retaining techs now. And so each year it kind of compounds, and our growth is that much more.
Do you still have any of those original techs?
Yeah. So I have 2 employees that were there on day one. And so, and Weston has worked with both of them, but so Anthony was a technician. He's now my field service manager. And then Ty was actually a parts person at the company when I bought the company, and he's now my kind of lead installer, project manager, and still goes out and also helps on service.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's awesome that you were saying it could have been a shock to him initially, and that you've been able to come through it, and now look where you are now.
Right. Yeah. So you look at when I bought the company, there was the 3 technicians, and then 3 people in the office, really. But we still have two with us.
So I think one thing that probably helped solve itself just through growing the business is, it's hard to retain people if they don't feel like there's a career. And you have been able to build a business big enough to where there is kind of a chain of leadership now, and there are new positions available.
Yeah. And so that's, we're still, somewhat limited just based on size, but we have been able to create positions. So we have, created the field service manager position. We have lead tech positions. We have, a technical support specialist position, that are all things that didn't exist prior.
Yeah. But, personally, I've noticed the huge impact that makes, even in just small positions that, a lot of entrepreneurs will kind of be like, oh yeah, well, they have big ambitions, and they're like, yeah, well, we're not that big. But when you can promote from within, and those people see that, it really makes a big impact. It took forever to get buy-in to people that I wanted to help my team or people, high-level leaders on my team, become a franchisee someday. And then when I developed the first franchisee and we bought a location, everybody was like, wait, that actually happened? Like that wasn't, you just weren't blowing smoke,
Right. Yeah.
And then we did it a second time. And everybody was like, okay, this is serious. And now I have people coming out of the woodwork saying, what do I have to do to become a GM? What do I have to do to become a franchisee? And those two little just things, just doing it once and then doing it twice, people all of a sudden were like, oh, I can have a career at Culver's, because people don't look at the restaurant industry like it's a lifelong career. It's no, this is a stopping place until I get my real job.
Right. And you obviously have those different leadership positions that people can work through, but them understanding that there's a pathway even beyond general manager, right?
Yeah.
So that's awesome that you have that ability, to groom people and go out to, and also a franchise system that supports that, right?
Right.
Making people or giving them the opportunity.
So that's something cool about your business too, is, Anthony or something could be a Nashville market partner, and he could open up a Nashville office or something,
right.
Something like that someday, because you want to grow and you expand and you're ready and you feel like he's capable or whatever.
Yeah. And we aspire to continue to grow, and, we still feel like we have a lot of room here in Lexington, but there will be a point in time where, our geographic footprint has to enlarge.
Yeah. Well, I heard you're doing workout in Bowling Green, so you're spreading your wings.
Yeah. So that's a kind of a unique situation, but
yeah.
We've been able to build some really good relationships over the years, and that just is a relationship that we have with an equipment dealer that asked us to help support them and getting a couple restaurants open out in Bowling Green, and we've grown to the size now where, and I have Ty as a project manager and install lead that allows me to take on jobs that are a little outside our typical footprint.
Right. Which is helpful.
Yeah.
So year 1 to 3, you really learned that you need people. It takes a while to train them, and you got to retain them because it takes so much upfront investment to train them. How long would you say it takes for a tech off the street? Let's just say they come out of BCTC. They're fresh with their certificate.
Yeah. So it's always individual dependent, but we can have somebody if they're super engaged and did well during their schooling. They can be, in 6 months is probably the front end of where I feel comfortable putting them out in a truck on their own. But it can vary too. So a lot of times when we bring a guy in, or girl, they would spend some time, generally riding with another technician, learning service, but then they'll also be involved in our project work. And so our projects typically are, building walk-in coolers and freezers, and we've expanded out. We're installing some exhaust hoods and makeup air systems. And but doing those install jobs is really an important piece of, I think, their learning, because if they can see how an entire walk-in system went in, it will help them down the road in their troubleshooting.
Right.
So, if we're really busy on projects, they may spend a little more time on the project side and be a little slower getting out onto full-blown service. But somewhere between 6 and 12 months is really a sweet spot to get them out in a van on their own.
Yeah. But I'm sure they're making more of what you're paying them, or they're producing more of what you're paying them, probably on the install stuff a little bit more than maybe the repair stuff in the beginning. I would say the repair stuff in the beginning, they're not really making the expert technician that much faster. Right.
They're in a lot of cases, it can slow things down.
Right. That's probably 100% investment into that individual, where you can show them how to put one wall together of a walk-in cooler, and they can do the other 4 walls.
Right. And that's, you bring up a great point there. So on that front end, when we're training someone on service, I really essentially just doubled my cost of goods to deliver that job. And so it is an investment in the technician, and it's an investment we gladly make, because it it would really be a mistake for us to hire someone and give them a couple weeks training if they don't have a background in it already and say, hey, go figure it out. Right. Because I'm not doing them a favor. They're going to be frustrated. I'm definitely not doing the customers any favors by doing that. And, so we take the time and sometimes probably slower than we should of getting guys, out on their own. But in that same time, we're investing in their hands-on training, but I'm trying to get them out to as many factory schools as I can. I'm trying to get them through the Commercial Food Equipment Service Association training class. That's a 6-day deep immersion class at the national training facility. So,
what is the biggest challenge you face? You have somebody that you just got in their own truck. What's preventing them from just going out and starting their own little side business?
Yeah, I really don't think there's anything preventing them from doing it. What they probably would, they all have that potential, and they could go out and do that. Where they would probably have the hardest struggle is just not having the support of a larger team, right? So now, when one of my guys is out and they're working on a particular piece of equipment, they can ring up 12 other people to say, hey, I'm in a bind here. What do I do?
Right.
You go out on your own, and that'd be a little tougher, but there's really nothing preventing them. And we've had some people leave and, go out and do their own thing and go to other companies. And, I'm very supportive. In most cases, if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to do this, I'm going to help you get to where you want to be, even if that's going out and doing your own thing.
That's cool. So we really kind of broke down year 1 to year 3. What did year 3 to year 5 or year 3 to year 6? What was the biggest lesson, and what were the struggles, growth of the company that you kind of went through there? Yeah.
So we got through the first couple of years, and I became very hands-on in that first little bit, and I knew all along that I have to get to the point where I can step back and be more of a facilitator. And that's really started to happen in year 3. And that's where we were able to kind of make the first leap in growth of the technicians was when I was able to step back and spend more time, facilitating the technicians doing their work. And so probably from year 3 to 5, 6, we were really gaining stride and building out a team, adding some trucks to the road. And then we got hit with COVID, which was a setback. Is everybody in the food service industry understands, the 2020 was a difficult year. We were able to weather the storm. We had some project work at the very front of COVID, and it allowed me to keep everybody employed, which was a big plus through 2020. And then at the tail end of 2020, we also took on some other larger install projects. And so we weathered 2020 pretty good. And then really, as we came out of COVID, really found our stride, and growth started to go from there.
What was that? Define what that stride was. What was the key that kept the clock ticking?
Yeah, well, I think part of it really was because we had the project work, and I was able to keep everybody employed. It was very helpful to not have kind of a break in continuity with the staff. So, and from there, it kind of snowballed, right? So we're able to go from 5 technicians to 6 technicians. And then when I hit 6 technicians, I was like, I think I got enough now. Let me hire 2 at a time as trainees. And so it just kind of becomes a compounding effect, and then probably end of 2022, we really made a jump, and I brought 3 trainees on at one time. And so that just compounds.
Yeah. There's a lot of people out there kind of that are older in the industry saying, oh, I've been having to do this by myself all these years, can't find good help, blah, blah, blah. And then I hear talking to you and you're like, well, we went from 3 to 10.
Right.
What's your key to finding these people that are good help and producing quality technicians?
I think it's twofold. One is I took the approach of we're going to hire people and invest the time in them. We're not going to just bring them off the street and 2 weeks later throw them in a truck and tell them to figure it out because they know how to use a multimeter, put a set of gauges on a piece of refrigeration equipment. So I think taking our time and developing them once we do hire them, we've had pretty good luck in our recruiting people out of the trade schools and hiring them kind of on the younger side with no job experience and giving them the opportunity to learn, but without making them drown by just throwing them out there.
Yeah. So you got through COVID, kind of weathered the storm, really started snowballing, figured out the training piece. What are you guys looking at now?
Yeah. So it's, we're at a growth point where we're still trying to figure the training piece out. I don't have it solved. It's a ever evolving process, but we're at a point where we feel good there, and we're kind of over the past year took and added some roles, and so I mentioned I added a technical support specialist. So I have a guy in the office now that's full time to support my techs out in the field. He has about 40 years of experience working on equipment, so he's a phone call away. He can help assist with the training. So it's not just relying on technicians riding with another technician. I have kind of a dedicated resource that can help support them. We had the field service manager position. Again, it's taking somebody that has a lot of field experience and taking the day-to-day assigned jobs off of them so they can support the newer guys and get them out and operating faster. Kind of, makes them be able to share their knowledge because they're not elbow deep in their own job at any given time. And then just providing, the back office support. So, to part of the growth has been adding those positions, in that each time we do that, it's very much an investment and a struggle on the front end, because you never feel like you're really ready to add that additional overhead expense but I see the value in it, and each time we do it, there's a slight uphill, and then it really takes off.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What's your or how many employees do you have total now?
So we currently have a total of 17 employees.
Oh wow. Okay. So quite the growth there. Yeah. To shift a little bit, we've talked about all the training and how do you retain and all that. Do you always have work just coming in that you always needed to hire? What was it like kind of on the sales side? How do you grow just getting work?
Well, really the blessing of having acquired a company that's been in Lexington for well over 30 years is our phone number hasn't changed, and the phone rings. We have times of the year where we're a little slower, but we're typically it's kind of a double-edged sword, but we have enough work that we don't really have to go out and sell ourselves. We let our customer experience sell us. And part of that was, for years, we didn't have the capacity to go gain more work. We always had more work than we could handle. And there's that fine line of, there's times of the year where you're a little slower. So we really haven't ever had to go out and spend a lot of sales marketing effort to keep ourselves busy.
Well, and that brings an interesting problem to mine that I haven't thought about before. Because at the end of the day, if my grill's down and you say, Weston, I can't be out there till, Monday, I'm calling other people.
Right.
I'm gonna spend the extra $20 an hour or $40 an hour to have Tech 24 come out or whatever else. So because you don't have enough people, you instantly can lose a sale because your phone is ringing. Where if you can get out there today, then I'm taking you.
Right.
And I think that's a challenge.
Yeah. I didn't, really hit on that, but when I say our phone's ringing, and for most of the time we have work, and the reason we're not going out and getting more is because we want to be able to have that good response time. And, there's, in July and August, it's very tough, and we have to very much prioritize work but we still, even in the worst of times, Friday is always a bad example, right? Because we're heading into the weekend. The guys, have already worked a very hard week, but we really do try to get to a first visit out, within one business day. And, it's definitely an industry and a need for the consumer that you can't be, I got an appointment 3 weeks from Tuesday. It's,
right.
One of the things I say to the guys all the time is we have to work at the speed at which the customer needs us. And that's the speed of now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a challenge. Because you run into a problem you weren't expecting on a job, and then a 2-hour job turns into a 5-hour job. And
yeah. And that happens, frequently, or even worse, or not worse, but more realistic is we can have a technician that's on call, and he gets called out late at night, and we have the whole next day already planned out. And then he finds out the compressor's out on a freezer, and he spends the entire night there. Well, now I've got to shuffle that entire next day because I'm not going to, put him out on the road after he was out till 4 a.m. working on a piece of equipment.
I'm probably one of those problems.
I do believe that happened.
It did happen.
But, again, that's one of the things that I think has also helped in our growth is still being a locally owned and operated business allows us to have that customer touch, to be able to understand and help prioritize the work and be a real human contact of, understanding that, there's tens plus $1,000s worth of merchandise in a freezer, and we have to get this running.
Yeah. How many employees or how many maybe service technicians do you think you're going to have before you are really going to have to start pushing like marketing?
It depends on the time of year. And I believe, I'll put it this way, that I believe that within the Lexington market, I could grow probably 5 to 6 technicians and not have to overly spend effort trying to gain work.
Wow. So really, all of your energy is focused on more technicians.
Yeah. And really that is the key to growth. And we don't have any growth without additional technicians. And so really at the end of the day, each technician is a little mini business unto themselves and their service van. Right.
Yeah.
And so, it's a much smaller scale than adding another restaurant, but adding another service van is, like adding a whole new territory.
That's so interesting because, most people before year 10 would be turning on the marketing piece, and they would be focusing now on sales and stuff. Mm-hmm. And your phone is ringing so much that it's like, nope, we're still just adding people.
Yeah. And I will say that
I know you have slow periods.
Yeah.
But
there was a breaking point, and they go hand in hand. So for the first 5-6 years I owned the company, we did zero marketing. And then it's probably been going for 3 or 4 years now. I do have a monthly spend in, Google AdWords and some search marketing. But it's still, as a percentage of sales, it's not the typical marketing budget that most places would have.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you have to brand,
right?
Yeah.
And really, the biggest drive of our brand is the guys out in the field.
Now, do you throttle that based on your busy seasons? So, like, are you spending a little bit more in marketing on your slow months than you are in your busy months? Are you turning that marketing piece off in your slow month or in your busy months?
No, I've held that flat.
Okay.
So, I designated a budget to maintain the website and maintain, the listing services and, have some search out there. And I've just held that flat.
Okay.
What is it certain times of year that you're busy versus slow? Because I feel like restaurants are running consistent year round.
Yeah. So there's definitely, over the summer is busier than the winter. So our historical slow period for service typically starts right around Christmas and will run into March, where our volume will slow down. And there's a couple of reasons for it. Is I think that generally, after Christmas season, restaurants slow down a little bit, and the weather constraints. So where we really are busy is in the hot, humid periods where HVAC systems and refrigeration systems are run full blast.
Right.
And you typically have more failures at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like right now, my AC units are just pulling outside air.
Right.
The refrigeration's not actually running. They're on their economizer and they're just pulling outside air and pumping that in because it's cooler.
Right.
Then,
right.
Or it's the same temperature that it is that we want it to be inside the building.
And so typically when it comes to the refrigeration piece, you kind of have a buffer season, so your HVAC systems are economizing this time of year. So you're not using your heat, you're not using your refrigeration. It's just blower motor, bringing outside air in. Refrigeration systems are working kind of, for walk-in coolers and whatnot. When the temperatures are how they've been, are operating in kind of prime zones, where we'll see the first time we get a real cold snap where it gets well down into the 30s, we'll usually see an uptick in refrigeration calls. And it's typically systems that are maybe a little short on their refrigerant charge, and it starts to show itself as it cools down. So you always get a spike at the first cold piece on refrigeration, which sounds counterintuitive, but then usually that stables off and it leads to the slower months where systems just aren't working as hard over the winter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
I want to go back to one thing you said. Kind of each technician is almost like their own business, right? Like they're the face. They're almost like they're a part of the big brand.
That's correct.
But they're the face of that brand individually at the same time. When you took it over, in terms of existing relationships with clients, were a lot of them tied to the old owner? How was it kind of coming in and building the brand itself and realizing, it's all about the brand?
Yeah. So I think when, I came in, it's always been kind of the face of each individual technician. At the time I bought the company, Danny, the founder, was 25% of the technician workforce. So he was still 25% of the face of the company out in the field with the customers. And he'd been doing it in the market for so long that he knew a lot of folks. And, when I first came in, I kind of came in with the attitude that I do want the technicians to be out there customer facing, because they're the ones making the interactions. And so I really tried not to be out and be the face of the company. I want the brand, the company, the technicians to be the face of the company, not Brian.
What would you say is the biggest challenge with that?
I think the biggest challenge is there's probably still it's that double-edged sword because we are a local brand, there's easy access for the end user to get to myself. And, more so when it becomes a troubled situation, we have them. But once they break through and they talk to the owner, right, then there's just a group of people that they always only want to deal with the owner at that point forward.
Yeah.
So, and I do, I'm happy to take the call, but I do try to get it handled. Hopefully the technician can handle it. If the technician can't handle it, then Ethan, my operations manager, or Anthony, the field service manager, can handle the situation, because at the end of the day, we just want to solve the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a big struggle with that, because people I know will be like, hey, we want to do this fundraiser at your restaurant, blah, 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 or whatever. Or, hey, my granddaughter or my daughter wants to work for you. I'm like, look, I promise it's going to be a lot better process if you just go through the system. Like, I will send my HR manager their name and say, hey, look out for this person. Or I will send my fundraising coordinator, hey, this person's going to be contacting you soon. But like, beyond that point, I'm going to screw it up. Right. Like, it's not going to be as good of a process, because that is not part of my daily routine. And I'm just not going to do it well. So if you just go through my team, I promise you're going to have a better experience.
Right. And I think that holds true in, so many cases. And what I've really found is I can be a bigger bottleneck than anything. And, as the owner, I'm juggling a lot of things like all owners do. And you because it's not your primary, you have somebody to fill that role, and they are going to be better at filling that role. And that's part of the growth we've had, is me handing off responsibilities and getting myself out of the way of being the bottleneck. If I have to, if every decision has to come through me, it's going to slow everything down.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes us as business owners, we overthink it, or we make it a lot more complicated than it needs to be, when the person on the front lines probably already has the best solution.
Right.
But now we're wanting to overcomplicate it, and it just needs to just be in their hands.
Yeah. And, I think I struggle with it is I can be slow sometimes because I want the perfect solution.
Yeah.
When, the 90% solution is probably the better answer.
Right. Very often do you have the perfect solution.
Right.
I've found, very often you have the perfect solution. It's, and sometimes you work so hard for the perfect solution, and then you grow yourself out of it 2 years later.
Right.
And so it's like, well, that was a great perfect solution for 2 years, but a 90% Band-Aid for 9 months, and then a new 90% Band-Aid for 9 months that we could have implemented right away, probably would have been better.
Sure. and I think that even, sometimes the team will be like, hey, that's not the way you did it last time. I said, well, it's an evolution, right? We made a decision last time, and then we're able to kind of reevaluate and assess how that decision played out, and let's modify it for the next time around.
Yeah. What would you say is the most difficult marketing piece that you guys, brand awareness, brand reputation, marketing piece that you guys experience?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier today. I think the most difficult piece is we're only as good as our last interaction with a customer. So, if our last interaction went well, then we can be a hero. Or if we had a complication or made a mistake, or there was just difficulties in it, we can be the zero. So, it's a constant process to make sure that we're delivering and standing behind the work that we do.
Right. And the even more complicated piece of that, I guess, is you don't have someone calling you that's happy.
Right. Yeah. I think I mentioned that earlier also is we typically, because the vast majority of our work that we do, the way I classify it is break fix on demand service. And when a customer calls us, they're already in a negative headspace because they have a major piece of equipment down, or a primary piece of equipment down that is costing them aggravation. It's going to cost them money in repair, and it's likely costing them a loss of sales.
Right.
So we start from a negative position in most instances.
Yep. And for people that don't know, it's never cheap. Like, it's never cheap. Even the simplest repair, you can have a $20 part that takes 3 hours to diagnose.
Correct.
And that's not cheap. And you can have a quick diagnosis and it's $1,000 or $2,000 part. And that's not cheap. And so it's never cheap.
Yeah. And that's, it holds true across the board. And, unfortunately there's times where you might have to spend an hour chasing a $20 part, and then you got to go get the $20 part to find out what else is wrong.
Right. Yeah. Because it's more than one thing. Yeah.
Correct. And typically that's the challenge, right? Is the, environmentally, it's never the best conditions to work on a piece of equipment. A job that you think should take an hour takes 2 hours because of access to the equipment or whatever the case may be. Adds time, adds expense. Everybody's under the same pressures. I've experienced over the past couple of years, the cost to replace a service van is almost doubled in the time that I've owned the company. And that all plays into what it takes to deliver that end service. So there's a lot of factors that go into it.
Yep. Get a flat tire on the way to a project.
Yeah. Not like vehicles, coming through COVID, it was so tough. The service vehicles weren't available, and the price has just gone up so much. And, we're trying our best to modernize our fleet and grow. So not only am I adding vehicles and expense to put a new van on the road, but I'm having to replace old ones. Yeah. And that's all a factor in how we have to charge, to deliver the service to the customer, because, those vans, it's, that's kind of our capital asset, right? Of how we go out and deliver service.
Yeah. An asset that's losing value every day too, unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah. You don't luck into some appreciation of the dirt when you're talking about a service van. Yeah.
It's not like you're just sitting on this thing watching it appreciate every year. Right. You're running it to the ground, really. Yeah. And it's a cost of doing business, but it is a huge expense. So when we take a new hire and we're investing 6-12 months into their training, we're investing in a service van, we're outfitting it with the tools, we're putting just hardware and supplies on those trucks. It's a large upfront investment, no different than opening a restaurant, right? There's always a lot of front end expense on doing a restaurant, and we just hope that it pays off long term.
Yeah. How many service vehicles do you have running? I guess one per each technician.
Right. So right now I have 12 service vans, and then we have a couple other support vehicles.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
No. Not cheap. Especially do the techs. I know every business kind of works different, but do you require the techs to buy their own tools, or do you provide tools?
So the way we do it is the techs buy their own hand tools. I will provide to them all the major equipment. So like their vacuum pumps, recovery machines, ladders. People don't think about it. It cost me $700 to put a set of ladders on a van.
Yeah.
And then they sit out in the sun and have to be replaced every 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
So we provide the major tools for them. My expectation is that they provide their own hand tools.
Right.
Do you have like a time threshold of, all right, you initially hire them. At what point are you investing in getting another vehicle? or all the extra tools to put them out on their own?
When they're probably at 75% ready to go on their own is when I'll typically put them in a van. Now they may still be working with another technician, but when they've gotten to that point, I'll put them in their own vehicle, and then we just have 2 vans showing up in the parking lot. But what that does, it gives me a little more flexibility of they don't have to spend the entire day with one technician. I can start to cross train them a little more. So they might work with one technician in the morning, then second technician needs help getting a 2 horsepower motor on a roof. So I can flex them over and they can go get some experience with a motor in.
Yeah. Or maybe they're really good on walk-in coolers and they can just go take that call by themselves real quick.
Correct. Yeah. So, and that's typically how it starts to happen. They'll start catching some service calls on their own within their skill set, while they're still, being developed.
Yeah. You're phasing them out. Yeah.
Correct.
That makes sense.
Was that something else that was kind of a surprise of not just the old assumption of, I could train them quick? And that turned out, not to be true. But also you realize how much you have to invest for one technician.
Yeah.
Equipment-wise.
And that's, like I said, the price has really gone up over the past couple of years. So
yeah, even tools have gone up.
Yeah, a lot. So I give an example of, in 2019, so almost 5 years ago, I bought some 2 service vans that year, brand new, that were 50% of the cost of the service vans I just bought a month ago.
Wow. Just to give us a rough estimate, I love getting into the details because it really paints a picture of what real life is like. People are like, oh, you're a business owner. It's so easy. You must be so wealthy. And it's like, okay, well,
a lot of reinvestment.
Yeah, a lot of reinvestment. What does it cost? Have you calculated out the cost of what it takes to add a technician in a van? Yeah. So I can break it down and, so I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but I'll give you some rough costs. So a service van with, drop down ladder racks, full shelving package, brand new right now is in the neighborhood of $50,000 for a van. We put on average about $8,000 worth of tools on the van. So, and then an average truck can ride around with another $5,000 or $6,000 worth of supplies and materials. So, you're starting to push up into the $65,000, $70,000 range just to get a new van rolling down the road. And then, the cost of training and whatnot, like I said, it's a 6 to 12 month investment to get a technician out on their own. So, and that's factory. Yeah. And then, so that's paying for food and travel. Right. So it's, paying them at, their hourly rate. We have a pretty good benefits package that we provide to the employees. So, wages and benefits. And then, we start factoring in, the cost of training and travel to send them out to factory training. So it could easily be $100,000 to add a new tech. 100 to 150,000, depending on how long it takes them to be out on their own. Yeah, that's a good chunk. It is, especially if you had 3 in a year. Correct. They're just went $450,000. Yeah. It's not down the toilet, but if one of them leaves at month 9. You just lost $75K, roughly, or maybe $50K, and you still get to keep the van and the equipment, but you lose all that training, right? And unfortunately, it does happen. We've knock on wood, had good luck with our retention, but there are times that we recently separated a technician that was 14 months in, so Pardon me? I said, ooh. Yeah. And so, we had invested a lot of time in training. As a matter of fact, when he did separate, he was 45 days out of doing a 6-day training class in North Carolina. So, it was, it's all part of the investment, right? And there's a cost when you do end up losing somebody that you've invested in. But you have to look at the flip side of that of what's the cost of not investing in them. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, is there anything, before we kind of wrap up, what's kind of the next season that you're wanting to go into? What's kind of your maybe 5 or 10 year goals, and what are you working on like right now to grow the business?
Yeah. So, ultimately I do believe, like I mentioned, I think Lexington, could easily support us, growing by, 50 to 100% over the next, 3 to 5 years. And that's, I believe, a very conservative estimate. So, we're always focused on that growth. And then we're also, developing our back office systems to support that growth. And so, that's investments in, upgrades to our technology, our field service software, our ability to track and, forecast, repairs, costs, et cetera. Good asset tracking to understand the life cycle costs that we've helped customers understand the life cycle costs of their equipment. And so we want to continue to invest in that technology to provide that additional service. So, when Weston calls me and asks, how much have I put into this ice machine in the past 24 months, he can make a good educated decision of on the next repair, or is it time to replace it?
Yeah. Which is advice that I've learned is very valuable, because the rule of thumb that I've followed kind of now is if the piece of equipment is 5 years or older and it's going to cost more than 50% of what it would cost to just replace it, it's 90% of the time just worth it to just buy a new one.
Right. And it's also somewhat the nature of equipment too, is equipment over time has become less repairable and more replaceable. When you're talking your smaller equipment, your major fixtures, walk-in coolers and HVAC systems still have a longer life cycle. But when you're talking your under the counter coolers and whatnot, there's definitely a fine line of when is it time to replace it versus do a repair.
Well, sometimes it's almost always a time to replace it. Like I still remember when I figured out how cheap our reach-in freezer is. Mm-hmm. It's like $2,800. I was like, I cannot believe how many $1,200 repairs I've put into this thing. It's $2,800. Like when you're talking about something that's 6 years old and you're dumping $1,200 into it, like I went 5 years without doing anything to it. So what's the likelihood if I just buy a new one, I'm going to go another 5 years without doing anything to it? Like,
right. Yeah. And if you're buying the right piece of equipment that has some front end factory warranty, when you're talking about a piece of, a reach-in freezer, and I'm not sure the brands you guys use, but there's brands out there that have 5 and 7 year compressor warranties on them, which is going to be your largest, repair.
Right.
And so that you have to look at that, right? It's already 5 years old. I can, spend even 3 times the repair cost, but now I'm setting myself up with a warranty that's going to carry me out for quite some time.
And the ones that are 15 years newer are a lot more efficient too.
Correct. Yeah. And that's, one thing that we work to coach the technicians on is, our guys want to go out and just fix stuff. And sometimes we have to get them to, take a breath and have a conversation with the customer before we do a $1,200 repair here and make sure that that's the right decision for them.
Right. Yeah. That's huge. Well, anything else you want to add?
No, I appreciate you guys bringing me on, and it's always fun to tell the story. I get excited about what our growth prospects are, the ability to provide opportunities for the folks working for me, and and just want to continue to help provide solutions.
Well, before we sign off, what's your either favorite bourbon or favorite restaurant in Lexington?
Yeah. So,
you can answer both or just one.
Yeah. So from a bourbon take, I've kind of gone back and forth on some, and my current one one that I don't mind sipping on is the 9-year Knob Creek.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been one that almost emptied the bottle on.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, I mean, we appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And I mean, me, like when I hear the story of a business, it makes me want to go use that business.
Yeah.
So, really awesome hearing just how much you pour into your technicians and where you're going.
Yeah, that's it's an exciting time. I'm happy to do it, and I like to see the technicians succeed, and it's just fun.
Yeah. Well, appreciate you coming on. We'll make sure and have your info on the website and in the show notes.
Yeah.
And it's a good story. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks.
you.